Welcome to Financial Footsteps, candid conversations with financial leaders, the podcast that takes you deep into the minds of the masters behind the numbers. Join host Chad Dean as he connects with financial leaders as they share their journeys so that we can gain valuable insight from their failures and triumphs. Get ready for candid conversations, behind-the-scenes anecdotes, and practical wisdom that will transform the way you think about your career in finance. Put down the balance sheet and listen in.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Financial Footsteps, where we explore the background and careers of financial leaders for the benefit of those who want to follow in their footsteps. My name is Chad Dean, your host. I've been a recruiter for 27 years, and I'm the owner and CEO of Integrated Management Resources, a Phoenix-based executive recruiting firm established 33 years ago. Integrated is the sponsor of this podcast today, and I am very excited about our guest today, Jack Spitzer, the CFO of Plexus Worldwide. Jack has had a long career in accounting and finance and is full of wisdom that I know will be incredibly beneficial.
You practiced that.
To our listeners.
Well done.
Welcome, Jack. How you doing?
Good. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. And thank you for being here. I went short sleeve shirt today because I want to brag a little bit to all those people that are out of state that it is third week in February, and I think it's going to be 80 today.
Yeah.
Something like that.
Yeah. I'm dying right now.
Yeah.
Actually. So it feels like a Zoom interview in person
now. I should have actually worn shorts, but nobody would notice since we're sitting down. But
I don't have pants on right now.
But that's great.
Let's not share that.
Yeah. Well, that'll make everybody smile and make them feel more awkward than you. So
yeah.
Well done.
Thank you.
So tell the audience a little bit about yourself. This is the personal side, your family, hobbies, where you grew up, that kind of thing.
Yeah. Born and raised in Ohio. So I grew up in the Midwest. Very proud of that. From a single parent family. My mom was a school teacher. So my sister and I and my mom grew up together and moved here in my early 20s. I've got 5 kids, married, 4 kids in their 20s. And then I've got a first grader. So it's been really interesting, second time through. And I've been out here for quite a while. Really enjoy the Phoenix area, mostly because of the weather. My passion is and hobbies involve traveling. I do like to travel. I've been able to go see a lot of places, but there's a lot of other places I still want to see at some point. And I also like astronomy and space exploration and rockets. I enjoy books on leadership. I spend a lot of time listening to books on different types of leadership styles and that sort of thing. So very, very non-nerdy things, rockets and satellites and things like that.
Yeah,
so
sure.
Very cool things.
We're actually going to cancel talking about your career and just go down those pathways because I also like rocket science. I think that's super cool. And what an incredible time when we're talking about sending people to another planet.
Yeah, it's really amazing to see the rocket technology. And I think the big rocket's going to take off again for the 3rd attempt. So that'll be really interesting. There's another lander on its way to the moon from the US, a second attempt, private perspective. So lots of good things going on in the space world. And it's very interesting stuff. Again, I'm a big sci-fi guy as well. So I really enjoy anything that's, not of this world, which probably explains a lot.
So let's say they wanted a CFO on Mars. Would you raise your hand and go away? What is it? 2 years? What's the travel time? I don't even know.
I think it's probably like 8 months, but I'm afraid of heights. So I'm not sure Mars is in the cards.
That sounds really high. Yeah.
Yeah.
To go up.
Yeah. I think I don't like that kind of thing, but I do like to watch it. So I got to see the space shuttle take off once in person, and that was a really cool thing. And that kind of fueled the fire.
Nice.
To watch more of it. So
nice.
It's really interesting stuff.
So where's your favorite place you've been in the last couple of years for travel?
Probably to Europe. My wife's from England, so been over there. But my all-time favorite place I've been is Bora Bora in Tahiti. So went there for a honeymoon and really enjoyed it. Thought it was a once in a lifetime thing, but definitely on the plan to go back. So got one of those huts above the water and really enjoyed it and took it in. So it was a great experience.
I've always wanted to do that. It looks so beautiful in pictures. I'm sure it's just as good.
Exactly the same in person. Yeah, it's just breathtaking.
Yeah, I like travel as well, and I married a flight attendant, so
Oh, okay. So no excuses.
no excuses.
Yeah.
Yeah, we can travel wherever we want and anytime. So
Very good.
that's pretty nice.
Yeah.
So take us back. You're currently CFO, but let's take us back to the genesis of your decision to make a career. Or what did you do? You were in college. You went to
Yeah.
Franklin College.
Yeah.
Tell us about that and what you were thinking at the time and what was going on.
Well, it was never really a decision. I really just kind of fell into it, to be honest. So I'd started out, I wanted to be an architect. I was in engineering school at Ohio State, and I decided that that probably wasn't my path. And so I ended up at Franklin, and Franklin at the time had a uh, at the time, and this is in the late 90s, was one of the first schools to come out with a program, a bachelor's in leadership. And again, like I mentioned before, leadership and studying leadership has always been kind of a hobby and an interest of mine. So I went to Franklin, got my degree in organizational leadership and management, and that sort of led me here. And but while I was in school, I was I was already moved out. I was married early, and so it was really just a matter of finding a job. And I fell into accounts payable, and I started doing accounts payable work. Started doing really well at it while I was going to school. And kind of one thing led to another. I enjoyed it, and I moved up, and one thing after another.
So are you a fan of the Ohio State?
I am the Ohio State
Okay.
fan. Yes,
Gotcha.
Yes.
Gotcha.
Big fan.
Yeah, it's and the passion that comes from that school is incredible. I learned that firsthand from a TA in Kansas in my biology program,
Mm.
and she was from the Ohio State, and she let everybody know about it. And that was when they were really good too, in the 90s, right? Mid 90s.
Yeah.
So I mean, not that they're not really good in today's day and age, but they were also very good back then. And so I heard about it all the time.
It's very different there in the Midwest. Football is a different thing.
Right.
So, yeah.
Right. So leadership how did you get your first job? I mean, how did that happen? You just needed a job and there was an accounts payable job there?
Yeah. So I worked at a Safelite Auto Glass, which is still around. Hey, if you've had your windshield replaced. And so Safelite was in the process of moving to Columbus, Ohio, their headquarters. And so they didn't really relocate much of the staff. And so I was one of 20 people hired to staff up their accounts payable department. So all 20 of us started together. And one of the supervisors came from Wichita, where they were based, to Columbus, and she was great. And but it was an interesting time to come together with a whole group of people simultaneously in a brand new spot, with try to learn what you were supposed to do. So we had about 2 weeks. They brought some people over. We kind of trained for 2 weeks, and then it was just kind of off and running. And back then it was very paper based. All the invoices and things you had to process. So it wasn't a lot of technology involved. But I was fortunate that our group was very eclectic. So I learned a lot about team dynamics very quickly. And I'm a pretty competitive person. So after a while, I sort of was trying to figure out, okay, what's the game here, right? It's a volume thing, but it's an accuracy thing at the same time. So we would talk about stats. And so stats became really interesting to me. And so I was like, okay, where's my stats? And how do I rank against other people? And how am I doing in the department of 20 people? And so after a while, I kind of figured out what the game was, and then and just started trying to apply myself in other areas and try to figure out, where can I add more value? And that kind of became a theme for me throughout my career of just how do I add more value to what I'm doing here, like in my seat or in my team. How do I do more than just this? And so that kind of became one of the big takeaways from that experience.
So were they keeping stats?
They were. And so every week, every Monday, we'd sit down and say, here's how many invoices came in. Here's how many went out. Here's how far behind we are by vendor. We had big vendors. We had regional vendors. So I handled one of the Safelite's regions. And so I had a set amount of stores. And so I had store managers and district managers and warehouse managers. And so I got to know a lot of them. And so we kind of kept track of the types of invoices we were processing, and were there GL coding errors or were there payment issues, and so we kind of went through and audited those, and we would publish them every week. And so we got to see those stats. And so it was like, okay, Monday, let's look at the stats. And if you're competitive, you're trying to figure out, okay, why am I at the bottom?
Whoever thought that
move quicker.
accounts payable would be competitive?
It would. Well,
Or you made it.
No, it was in my own
competitive.
world. So it was 1 against 20 in my head.
Yeah.
And but it
And
was
the
for
other
me.
19 didn't know they were playing.
No,
a
they
game,
didn't.
Did
They had
they?
no idea. Zero clues. So, no, it didn't hurt that I walked around and had a shirt made. I'm number one.
Number one. That's funny.
But I think when you're trying to figure out, how to be more engaged, you have to figure out what it means to you. And for me, it was like, well, I want to plow through the most amount of work in the best possible way. And so you start thinking about, well, how can I do this better? How can I do this easier? And so it's not so much how fast your hands move all the time on the keyboard, but it's like, well, is there something else I can do here to make this go better? And then can we apply it somewhere else? And so that to me became a bigger part of the game. Like the stats were fine for a minute, but it largely became how do I make this more efficient?
Yeah. So coming in without an accounting degree, did really no idea that you even wanted to be an accountant.
No.
What was that like? I mean, was it easy to figure out? Did they train you well?
Yeah, the training was really well, and then I got put kind of in a lead position. So when the supervisor was out, I did kind of her daily reports and things like that.
Because of your leadership.
Yeah,
undergrad work, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
My gamification in my head, it was clearly evident. So no, but it was just trying to again make something more out of than what it really was at the time, and try to learn as much as you can. So getting put kind of in a lead spot helped give me exposure to, okay, here's how you create the stats, and here's how you create the reports that everybody's going to see. And so it opened up some more doors to do more things and get a little more confident.
So how does that lead to Phoenix? How did that happen?
Well, as soon as I finished after SafeLight, I went to work at a healthcare company and doing some of the same things, but I started branching into receivables and started getting a little broader accounting roles. Finished school, and the owner where I worked at the healthcare company told all of us, maybe 2/3 of us, that he was going to downsize the company. So we were all going to get laid off. So I had already decided right around that time that I wanted to move here. So I'm going to graduate and I'm going to move here. So this is great. You're going to sever me anyway. It's good timing for me. So it was summer.
Great time to move to Phoenix.
Great time to move to Phoenix. Yep. I came here in August, unpacked it by myself. But had one kid and another one just born. So I had 2 kids. And luckily, the week before I moved here, I lined up a job at DoubleTree Hotels and started at my new job as soon as I got here. I unpacked the truck and started on Monday. It was literally that quick of a turnaround. But it was really just it was largely a weather move, just to shake things up. So I was fortunate that I had a job lined up before I came here. No family, no friends. So it was pretty stressful.
Yeah, I bet, especially with kids.
Yeah.
Wow. So, do you have the accounting bug at this point, or just it was a job and it was you knew you had the experience and tell me about that.
Yeah, I wouldn't say I ever had the accounting bug. I think because I was always a numbers person. I was always really good at math. That was kind of one of my things I was good at. Wasn't good at other things, but I was really good at math. And so I really leaned into the fact that I liked that there were so many numbers. There were stats, and there was debits and credits, and all the parts of the business that were numbers based. I was really interested in it. So I think that with the sense of some of my experiences I had early on in high school where I worked, the thought of being in the business from a financial perspective, a numbers perspective, is really what kind of hooked me in. Now, I didn't know at the time, was it accounting or was it more finance, FP&A or treasury? But I knew I was in the right realm at that time.
Did you even know the difference at that time?
Very high level, because it's funny, you're so clueless, and you think you may know you're somewhat clueless when you're that age, but you don't realize how clueless you are until much later. And that's
which is a good thing, right?
It's a good thing.
Ignorance is bliss.
It is bliss. But it's funny when you try to talk to people younger that age, there's no way they can possibly absorb exactly what you're saying. And it's not anything against them or what you're saying. It's a tough thing to try to convey to somebody the full scope of being that age in any kind of a role and understanding what's going on around you. And I think that's something that's really tough. So, I think in the time I was blissfully ignorant, but relying on, just trying to work hard, be smart, treat people right, and just see where it goes.
Let's go back to the story of when you were in high school and when you were working. And I respect the fact that you've been working a long time and you worked through high school. I just did a LinkedIn post that I pretty much started working at 13 because I needed money. I was
Yeah.
raised by a single mom.
Yeah.
And if I wanted something, I had to go and work for it and
Yeah.
earn it. And so I worked my way all the way through everything. Sounds like just like you. So let's go
Yeah.
back to that story that kind of actually might be a little bit of the genesis of all this.
It was definitely influential. And so I had done kind of some odd things, just odd job type stuff back then. You'd shovel, you'd cut grass or whatever, but
Shovel snow.
Yeah.
Yeah. What's that?
Yeah, it's different. But I had a summer job at a kind of at a retail store for a summer. And that was when I think when I was 15 and a half, maybe. When I turned 16, I got a job at the local IGA. Now, IGA is Independent Grocer Association. There used to be IGAs everywhere until they were all gobbled up. So there's
still an IGA in Waukene, Kansas.
Okay, well, places like that, there's probably still an IGA. There's one in Kauai. There used to be one in Kauai.
Oh, I didn't know that.
But so there used to be a lot of IGAs. So I worked at an IGA. The owner was a guy named Ben Mango, and Ben was a older Italian guy who had moved here, and he had, I think, 4 stores, but he primarily was at the store I was at. So I started there when I'm 16. And as I remember the story, my mom will probably tell me differently, but I think I turned 16. My mom came home the next day and said, "I got you a job at the store." Now, my mom had been shopping there my whole childhood. So anyway, I started there, and he was,
Wait, were you looking for a job, or your mom just came home and said you got a job?
She's like, "You got a job."
I love it.
It's like, "You start tomorrow." So I was like, "Oh, okay." So I had been there as a kid, I've been there a lot. So anyway, start the job, and again, coming from single parent family, he was a great spot for me to be around somebody like him, because he had crazy good work ethic. He had obviously made a success of himself. He taught me a lot about the value of customer, and so I would watch how he operated and listen to the things he said. He was a really tough guy, but it's super generous heart, super warm heart. But the way he talked about customers and the way he talked about customer experience, it stuck with me ever since. And so when you understand the value of somebody coming into your business, whether old days it's all face to face or e-commerce today, but when you really understand the value of somebody coming in, and if your mentality is to serve them, right, as they come in. So in the store, it's like we're taking your stuff out to your car. Like we used to take everybody's groceries out to their car. We wouldn't leave carts in the aisle. We wouldn't leave cardboard boxes laying around. Like we were always thinking about, how does this look and feel to the customer? Like we don't walk by people without saying hello or good morning. And so when you see all those little things and you add them all up and you see the effort, like the guy's 60 and he's working 8 a.m. to 10 p.m. Like that's the display. That's the standard. It's hard not to see it and take it into account when you're at that age and impressionable. And so I quickly learned, like I started out bagging, then I was a cashier, then I was a stocker. I worked in produce. I worked back in the deli. And so when you start working around the store and you realize it's different things, and you're getting opportunities to work in other areas because of your work ethic and the way you treat people, it sticks with you. Like, oh, this is the way, right? Not to be Mandalorian, but this is the way.
Right.
So I think for me, I've always been a person who's started with service. And so that was the perfect environment for me to be in, a very service focused, customer focused environment. And to be reinforced with, this is the way you do it. And so you just see it all the time. And the reward was I got to work even more hours.
Congrats.
So I had
Make more
summers,
money.
I had like 60-hour weeks in the summer as a teenager, which was kind of weird. my friends would be there like 6 hours a week and I'd be there 60. But it was a result of the fact that I had already earned his respect, but it was also a lot of the things he was preaching were things that I knew in my heart were the right things to do, like take care of people, right? You take care of people, that things can take care of themselves. So it doesn't matter if you're working with them or their customers coming in. So those things were, I did that for 3 years. Those things were very impressionable. And at the end of high school, he gave me some scholarship money to go to school. And he was a very big influence. His family was involved with the store, so it was a great experience for me.
Sounds like very meaningful to
Very
you.
meaningful.
Had a very strong impact. So I don't think there's a CFO that's sitting in the chair or has sat in the chair that you're sitting in right now, not your CFO chair, but this podcast chair, that hasn't mentioned work ethic and how important it is.
Yeah.
And I've asked this question when it comes up, and inevitably it came up.
Yeah.
Is that inherent in the individual, or is it a learned skill?
I think it's yes. It can be both. For me, watching my mom work hard, it was like never a thought in my head not to work hard. It was just, that's what I saw. Like you'd see somebody go to school and come home and try to do everything all at the same time. And when you're little, you don't fully appreciate it. When you get to be a teenager, you start to get it a little bit more, especially when you start working. You're like, oh, this is hard. And then of course, further on in your career, and you look back and you're like, you have kids and you're working, and then you're like, oh, by yourself, super hard. But I think I think you can learn it if you're around the right people, even if you didn't necessarily weren't influenced it early on. And I think it's something that some people are around and they still can't be influenced by it. And that's where I think it becomes a little problematic. Some people only have one speed,
Mm-hmm.
and it's not the right speed. And it's just the way it is.
Yeah. That's, I think, one of the keys to our society is teaching hard work and the value of it, and having that mentor. And it sounds like you had more than one, including a parental
Yep.
mentor that taught you the power of hard work.
Yep.
And that is, I think, and I just truly believe that hard work will take you much further than anything else. It'll overcome a lot of deficiencies.
I could not agree more with that. I think work ethic is gigantic.
Yep. All right. So you're at Hilton, and then, are you? Tell me, like, when did the next role you went to? Tell us about that. You kind of went into more of the IT side of things, it looks like.
Yeah, well, I went my DoubleTree Hilton life was short lived. So after I get laid off from my job in Ohio and move here, I'm at DoubleTree for maybe 3 weeks and find out we're merging with another hotel company.
Good timing.
And I think about a month after that, we found out that DoubleTree's leaving Phoenix, corporate office is leaving and moving to Memphis. So I had an opportunity to move to Memphis, but I'm like, well, I just lived in Columbus. So if I wanted to live in Memphis, I'd live in Columbus. So I was like, no, thanks. So now I'm out of 2 jobs. Now, the good part was several of us at the time, Starwood had just bought Sheraton and Westin, and they were ramping up. So I just over the weekend switched over to Starwood, and I stepped right into a great opportunity. I mean, I don't know, 27 or something. And I go in there, and because they had made these huge acquisitions, Starwood was just this little tiny REIT, but they made these huge acquisitions. So there was like my 4th week, I'm on a plane to Seattle, where I spent like 2 months with like 6 or 7 of my colleagues trying to figure out how to assimilate all the accounting functions back to Phoenix. And so it was such a whirlwind to like spend less than a year at DoubleTree as you're winding down and feeding things off. And then next Monday, you're like, oh, I got to start this job. And you're up at, another city, and you're gone for a couple months, and then you're
like
back.
a consulting gig.
It was odd. And so I'm like, oh, so you're, I mean, I'm not going to lie. I was just winging it, But again, that's where work ethic, does come in. And then a few months later, we're in Boston doing the Sheraton transition. So in my first year, I was like, I don't even know what Starwood is. All I know is these Westin jobs, and I know these Sheraton jobs. But I was around a lot of great people, a lot of smart people. And so my first year there in accounting was really just assimilation, how to bring it all in, and some of the crazy processes we were doing to try to make it all work with not much. So one example is I was overseeing payables and billing and receivables there. So we used to print out all of our hotel invoices every month for all the fees, all the backup, lay it all over the floor everywhere, and sort it and staple it because our system couldn't email back then. So and then we'd have to make double copies of it, mail one of them out
overnight.
Yeah, please pay us. And then save the other one because they would call and say, I never got it. So we pull it out of the file and do this whole thing. And it's like, it was crazy. It was craziness. 3 different ERP systems at the time, trying to mesh it all together and go live on a 4th. So anyway, it was a great experience though, because it was chaos. It was uncomfortable. And I think it's really important to acquire the skill of being uncomfortable. I think being uncomfortable breeds confidence. And so if you have a good work ethic and you're comfortable being uncomfortable, I think that what it'll output is confidence. And so for me, all of that taking place in a year just was like an acceleration of learning, right? Just being around, clearly I was around people that knew better than me, and some that maybe didn't, but it was a fantastic opportunity. And I was very fortunate to step into Starwood.
So what skills, besides being uncomfortable and just everything on the accounting side, what did that particular job teach you?
Yeah, I think early on, there's a lot to do with how do you create something that's good, that has rigor and is repeatable. And so when you're looking at massive amounts of billing, or you're doing jobs that are a lot of volume, like there's a lot of debits and credits to process, or there's a lot of bills to pay, or there's a lot of bills to send out, you have to really figure out, okay, well, how can I possibly do this in the most efficient way other than just work like 15-hour days? And so I think establishing what good looks like was an important theme in my career at Starwood. And I think you learn what good looks like by being in it. And the only way to really know if you later on in your career, you end up some company and you can step in and you can figure out pretty quickly where are the good pockets and where are the pockets that need improved. But that's a result of being around and working at a place where you are forced to learn what good looks like, and that sticks with you. And so that becomes a great teacher to, through trial and error, a lot of mistakes, along the way as well. Like, okay, that didn't work out very good, or that wasn't the greatest thought in the world. But getting to, to fail and to succeed and try to do that at a high velocity, eventually you kind of figure out, okay, this is what it looks like. But more importantly, you figure out a path to figure things out. And so you don't really realize it at the time. Okay, I solved this billing thing, or I solved these other things. But what you're really solving is the ability to solve. And so again, it's an uncomfortable thing to have to solve something where there's no playbook, right? And so once you get comfortable kind of solving things, then you realize after a while, well, what can I not solve, or what more can I solve? But you have to learn how to solve things. And so again, that's part of the trick over time, is just, it's not really getting the billing out better back then or paying the bills more efficiently. I mean, it's fun for a minute, but it's really just like, okay, what's my learning path to take on something new and make it better in the most efficient way possible? And so you start thinking about, okay, there's a process in your head of how you go through that.
And
it's
you
a great
pattern things.
Yeah,
right?
a pattern. Yeah. And it's a great learning experience when you can figure out how to figure things out.
Well, I think the key that you said, figuring things out, is making mistakes and learning from those mistakes, right? How many iterations did Edison have to go through to come up with the light bulb?
A lot.
A lot.
Yeah.
So, all right. So and I'm going to keep asking you this, and maybe you don't even have it, but was the accounting bug biting at this point?
Well, here's the thing. So again, I was a numbers fan, right? So um, I would say the accounting bug never bit. Just to answer that once and for all, it was
Okay.
more just like, well, it was more later just about trying to be true to what I was. And so the reality of what I was is, or what I am, I'm a fixer. So I enjoy being in finance a lot. I like numbers, but the core of what I am is I enjoy fixing and building things in the concept of serving. So the IT opportunity you mentioned before was a role that got created at Starwood, where they were creating a liaison between our ERP department and IT and accounting to be the go-between. So accounting wants this thing done. IT was going to develop it. Okay, Jack's going to sit in the middle. He's going to interpret it in accounting language to the developers. He's going to test it. He's going to tell the developers what's wrong with it. And he's going to keep testing until he feels like it's at a sufficient spot to let the accounting people try it. And so that was kind of my role, was the in between. And later it turned out to do, implementations and things like that. And got some SAP training. But at the time it was like, oh, well, I can fix a lot of the accounting things if I sit down here and work on them through the accounting lens, sitting with the IT folks, sitting with the developers. Like, this report you just built, it's kind of half of what they're looking for. This enhancement you're creating that they're asking for, it's not quite the way they need it to be. And here's the reasons why. And so then I felt like, okay, I'm going to make a difference to the group I just left by sitting down here with this group and talking and try to understand, how do I be the United Nations between dev speak and accounting speak? And so it really kind of more fed into, okay, I can make things better in this spot. So I said, yeah, I'll go try that. It's uncomfortable. I have no idea. The only non-tech person down here, I'll go try it. So
I just came up with the name of our podcast. I'm a fixer.
I'm a fixer.
Yeah, I love that. I've
Yeah.
never heard anybody
Well, I just tried to say
portray it that way.
Straight talk as possible. That's just kind of the core, right?
Right. And so I've never really thought of it in that way. And so that's fascinating. So do you know at this point that you want to be a CFO? Is that on your radar? Like, when
No, I don't think so. I think that came a little later. So after IT, I moved into, we launched Six Sigma. So I became a black belt, and I got to, work for the CFO, and basically whatever project he told me to work on for his team, I worked on. And that's, I think, where I started to realize, like, okay, now that I'm going to get exposed to a lot of other areas of finance through projects, right? I'm looking in Six Sigma, you're looking for defects. It's lean management. I'm looking for defects. Like, why is this process broken? Or how do we fix this other thing? How do we make something more profitable, more time efficient, whatever it is? And I did some hotel projects as well. But I think the excitement there of taking what I'd done in IT, and which was a lot of just being in between on projects, and then applying it, like, the full-time job is the CFO wants you to go help treasury, or he wants you to go help HR at the time, or whatever it was. So then you get exposed to their teams and what they're working on and what they do. And then you start seeing things in a bigger light, how things are connected, right? This thing over here feeds this other thing over here, feeds this other thing over here. And then I think that's when I started thinking, okay, at some point I probably need to find something with a bigger scope instead of just solely being a fixer.
The fixer.
Yes.
That sounds like
The
a
tool
name
belt.
in a Tarantino movie, right?
Yeah.
Isn't it The Fixer? Isn't
Yeah.
that
Yeah, that's another episode. But I think that's where it kind of opened my eyes. I didn't know what it was, but I knew, like, if I had more scope, I could probably make maybe a more influence on getting things the way maybe they could be or should be.
So I see another theme here. It looks like during the Six Sigma black belt work that you were doing, you were also getting an MBA.
Yeah. So I went back to school, and my MBA experience at ASU was fantastic. And so at the time, this is right around when Dr. Crow came in. I think when I started is right when he came in.
Same here.
So same here. Okay.
Yeah.
So at the time, the program I was in was a locked cohort program. So I started, it was one class at a time. It wasn't meant to get you done in 9 months. It was 2 years, one class at a time, but the same group of people. And the same group of people was fantastic experience because there were people in there more experienced than me, maybe the same experienced as me, but diverse group. And when you get super comfortable in a classroom setting with people and you can start talking about whatever the subject is in the realest way possible and nobody's afraid to share, um, it was a great learning experience to hear people in different walks of life who had achieved maybe more talking about how this topic impacts them or how they've applied it. And so when that experience was over, I was relieved because, again, working, kids, school, second time around, it's not fun.
That was the evening program, right?
That was evening.
Yeah, I was in the same program,
Not
but I didn't have kids.
Yeah.
That just throws that's astronomically harder than what I did.
Yeah, well, it was tough. And then I think at the time my fourth, it was right around 9/11, and my fourth one was born when I started. So no, it was tough, but when it was over, I was so relieved it was over work wise. I don't like homework. I don't like actually doing the work, but I love the conversation. I love hearing what people are doing and hearing people's thoughts about things. And so I really like the first 6 months, I was so used to running around. I didn't know what to do with myself. And I thought, should I get a PhD? I thought, you're an idiot. What are you going to do with that? Nothing, zero. So that went away very quickly, but I missed the interaction a lot. Like it was, and I had talked to some other classmates and they were the same way. Like we used to go out after class. We'd go like out to happy hour together. Like we were tight.
Yeah, we did the same thing.
It was great.
A great experience.
I loved it.
So why did you choose MBA versus master's in accountancy, since you never really had the true accounting
bug
training? Yeah.
Training, yeah. No, that's a good question. I think, if I were telling young folk today, I would say, look, if you want to go into accounting or finance, I would say I would get your CPA. Now, unless you know for sure you're not going to get anywhere near accounting or maybe even CFO. If you want to do something different, if you want to go into investment banking or something else, maybe a CFA. But I would say finish your 4-year degree, get your 5th year done if you need it, get your certification, take some time, maybe 5 years, then go back if you can and get your master's too. But you definitely have to have one or the other. And I think for me, if I had been a little bit more aware of where things may go, I would have done it back then. I would have gotten my CPA, even though I had no desire really to be a technical person. But it would have definitely removed obstacles, and it probably would have opened up more doors along the way. So
that's good advice.
Yeah.
That's good advice. So, so now you come out with your MBA, and at what point did you know, okay, I got my eyes on the CFO prize? Like, where was that spark?
Well, I think I think for me it started after I left Starwood. But one of my things I realized after I left Starwood was I stayed too long at Starwood. And I think we all have things that you could consider are a blessing and a curse. And I have 2 or 3 of those things. And one of them for me is, I get really attached to people because I'm so service oriented. I want to take care of and I want to support the people side of whatever we're doing, whatever we're tackling. I like the we part, the us part of it. And so it was a in hindsight, I probably stayed 3 years too long at Starwood. I was there 15 years. So I feel like if I had left sooner, I could have started this next phase of my career sooner. But when you're in something and you've put so much into it, from where it was in your little tiny neck of the woods of a big company, like we were Fortune 500 by then, it's hard to leave it behind. And so I think for me it was another learning moment of, am I self-aware enough when it's time to do something different? And I think if I'd been more self-aware, I could have made my next move, which I think got me on the path to become a CFO. I wouldn't have been a CFO there. And so it's really like, I got to find the right size company where I can come in and try to make a big enough difference to create myself an opportunity to be CFO. And I think if I had done it, if I had started that 3 years sooner, I probably could have got there quicker.
Did you know during that 3-year, let's just focus on that 3-year period.
Yeah.
Did you feel anything with yourself? Like, were you constantly questioning, where do I need to go next?
Yeah,
And
I was.
talking yourself up like, okay, you got to get out of here. And then another year goes by, or is
It was. And I think that's the blessing and curse thing is like, your head and your heart sometimes don't talk to each other the right way. And so I tend to overlead with the heart and the head's lagging. And some days it would flip, but then I would flip it back. And because there were so many great things that I liked about working at Starwood, this amount of people, the smart people I was around, and great team. It's a tough thing when you think about just, okay, that's over, just like that. And after 12 years and then 15 years, it's a tough thing to sever yourself in your head of, okay, I was here when it was nothing, like it was little, and now look at it. And so how do you divorce yourself of it when it's not a question of being miserable, but it's a question of being aware enough. Like sometimes you got to leave the nest. And I think there was a lack of awareness on my part of leaving the nest sooner was probably the better thing to do. Now, towards the end, I could see things were going off the tracks, and we got acquired by Marriott. I think maybe less than 2 years after I left. So that was really the motivation at the end was, okay, things are kind of coming off the rails here. But at the moment, this is right after the financial crisis, probably in 2010. Had I left in 2010, I think I'd have been, further ahead, on that next journey of just taking all that learning and just applying it in a very focused way in a smaller company that needed that kind of rigor. And I was very fortunate to get the role at Isogenics and then later at Plexus. It's been there. Plexus has been a great spot for me. They gave me a great opportunity to be a CFO. The CFO that was there before was retiring, and I came in behind him with the eye to replace him at retirement. And he was fantastic. He let me, lift up the hood and dig through everything. And he was totally supportive of every single thing that I wanted to do. And it really allowed me the opportunity to get into the weeds and put my stamp on it. And then he left and I took the spot. But it was a great transition for me to kind of ease my way into it and work on it, and get it to where, for me, the way I wanted to do it. And so very grateful to Plexus that they gave me that opportunity to, to become what I thought I could become.
How'd you find that job?
They just recruited me. So it was just, I didn't know of it. And so just good recruiting.
I love recruiters.
I know.
They're so great. So before we, I want to jump on something because I've never had anybody with an actual degree in leadership. It took me, I probably figured out servant leadership sometime in 2011 or 12 and what that actually meant. And it's built for me because I just really care about people and I enjoy learning about people and what makes
We're
them
the same.
tick. So was servant leadership taught in the late 90s? Was that a concept?
It was.
Okay.
And so we talked about different types of leadership, but we also talked about situational leadership in the classes. And so you would talk about this scenario, you can pull out of your toolkit a different leadership style as needed. And so you have one that you lean on and one that's you, but sometimes certain situations call for a different type of leadership. And so we talked a lot about that. There's these scenarios, and you can glean a lot of those things from different types of people. You're a religious leader, you're a military leader, you're a business leader. And so it was a great kind of experience to study different people and different professions, different types. So we talk back then, it was a lot about Drucker and all those contemporaries back then. And so you're diving into this stuff, and you're also looking at the reciprocal. What's behind every good leader? You need a lot of good followers. And so it's not just the leader's job to get people to follow, but there's some ownership by the people that are following you to help out, right? It's not a forced thing. So, to try to dive into and understand that relationship between leader and follower. And for most of us, whatever leadership role we're in, most of us report to somebody else, or we have somebody else that we follow, whether it's through work or otherwise. And so you have to figure out, well, how do I serve when I'm the follower, right? In this relationship, how do I help this person in the best possible way they can? Like, can I complement something that they can't do or don't have time to do? Or can I help them with some project? And so I think just recognizing that every leader, for the most part, is also a follower. And so you have to be just as good at both. And so it was a good way for me to think about, no matter where I'm at or what I'm doing, I'm probably going to have people I'm responsible for, but their perspective is the same perspective I have up is, well, what else can I do? Or how can I help? And I think when you understand it's mutual, I think things go a lot further.
You want to talk about self-awareness. That takes a tremendous amount of self-awareness.
It does.
What you just said,
Yeah.
very profound as far as serving up. And even if it isn't somebody within the organization, that's fantastic. So, and then another question that I want to ask you, I wrote down a long time ago. It's funny, the common theme with CFOs is hard work, but it's also math. Math comes up every conversation. Love math. I loved math when I was a kid. I didn't love math when I was a kid, which is why I'm not a CFO. But what do you think? And I'm springing this on you. AI and math. Is math going to be as important going forward with AI right there, ready to help you?
Well, I don't think adding and subtracting. I mean, I can ask Alexa now to do stuff like add and subtract, but I don't see math ever getting less important, because I think the more aware we become of AI and technology and physics and the way things work, I do believe there's probably a mathematical equation that can explain almost anything. And so I think, if anything, it's just going to create more questions. And so I think the need for people to understand math in a different way and apply math in a different way will change. But I hope it doesn't erode from people being able to do some level of math, through secondary school and above. I do think it's important to be able in your head to understand how a KPI at work is calculated, and know if it's the denominator or the numerator that's making a difference. And I don't think if you understand those kinds of concepts, I think it's really tough in any finance position, especially CFO, if you can't think about things from a ratio perspective.
That's fabulous. Yeah, because people talk about AI taking away people's jobs, and there's nobody that knows better except for somebody that's in the job. And understanding those finite numerator, denominators, all the variables that are going into it. I'm sure the machine can probably learn some of that stuff, but the little nuances of how to run a business, I don't know.
Well, if it spits out a number and you don't understand it in your head, you
Right.
can't fact check it. Right. So you still got to verify, at least the stage we're at today with AI, you still got to do a lot of verification. No matter what you're running through AI, you can't just assume the output is correct.
Everybody can smell AI too now, I think,
Yeah.
after about a year and a half being exposed to it.
Yeah, and I think another thing for the younger folks too. I think that if whatever area of finance you're going to go into, if you're not thinking about analytics and data, whether it's accounting or treasury or FP&A, you should be thinking about analytics. If you can take a class in data analytics or BI, you should take it. I think I saw ASU's got an accountancy data analytics degree. There's already a shortage of accountants, a shortage of CPAs. That's not forecasted to get any better. And so I think analytics is going to be super important. And I think technology in the role of finance, it's before you're like, oh, I got budgeting software. That was like, okay, I don't use Excel. I have budgeting software. You were kind of like cream of the crop. Budgeting software, will go by the wayside. And it'll be more AI based, more generative AI based. So coming up now, you really have to be comfortable with technology. If you're going to be a leader in finance, it's going to be very tech driven. And, I think that's an important thing for people in school to think about and embrace. Or if you really like that even more than finance, like if finance is a secondary thing, I don't think you have to go into IT. I think you can go into finance and still be very IT focused because there'll be so much of it in the future.
Great advice.
Yeah.
Data analytics.
Oh my gosh.
As a recruiter, and we're looking at all the jobs and what all
Yeah.
of our clients want. Everybody wants that
Yeah.
understanding.
Yeah.
I'm going to go back to the leadership thing because I always think this is important. Everybody's sitting here going, am I a leader?
Mhm.
Is everybody innately a leader? Do you have to, is it again, let's, is it a learned skill? Is it trial and error, or do you think there's just natural born leaders? And you as a leader expert, I'm going to call you a leader expert because you have a degree in it. What are your thoughts on that?
I think there's always people that are naturally good at something. And I don't think leadership's any different. So I think there's some natural inclinations there. If you realize that this is something that you're probably good at, like rounding people together and getting everybody focused and pointing in the right direction, regardless of what the business is. If that's just a general thing you're naturally good at, I think there's definitely that. But I do think it can be learned. And I think where there's a shortfall today is people that are becoming first-time managers, or even harder, what I would call a director level or above is like a leadership position in my head. I think first-time managers, I don't know if companies are still very good about really giving people the proper tools to be a manager. Like I think the first time I became a manager, it was I just relied on people's skills and work ethic. I didn't realize what I didn't know, but there was no training, there was no mentor, there was nothing. And I think that companies set themselves behind when they're not prescriptive with the people that they have. So if you're a first time manager, first time over people, I think there's some training and there's some mentorship. You should have somebody outside your area you can go talk to and get advice from, not your boss. And I think that's a general whole that's not great. Just generally speaking, some companies do it better than others. We have a really good L&D team at Plexus that I'm super proud of. But when you get into a leadership position, a director position, I think going from manager to director is the biggest jump. And in my head, it's the biggest jump because you've clearly been successful as a manager. The question is, can you transition into being strategic? And so when you're trying to transition into being strategic, you're trying to think about, if I was the manager of treasury, I'll just use an example, or accounting, if I was stepping into a director role, my question to the person stepping into the director role was, well, what's your vision for what this department needs to be? It's not what we got everything done in our normal cycle. That's what the manager does. Like make sure everything's done best possible way. But where does it need to go? Well, one thing is maybe it's AI, maybe it's technology. Like, can you articulate, we have to transition this into this to stay competitive, or we're growing so fast, we can't do things this way. So we've got 1 year to get rid of like half of this manual work. So I don't need to double the size of the team. That would be a strategic position. And I think it's hard when you're a manager to like step into a director spot. And I think that too needs some prodding. It needs some training, it needs some mentoring. And I
You
think,
knew that was going to be my next question.
yeah,
Are people natural strategists?
no, they're not.
How do you learn
And
that?
I think those, as you go up, the likelihood of finding the natural is less and less.
Well, that's why there's less and less people, right?
Yeah.
What do you think? Seeking out mentors, is that probably, if it's not innate in the company to teach you these next steps? How does somebody that's sitting in that seat says, I want to be a manager, I want to be a director? What do they do? And they don't have any help at their company.
Well, first and foremost, everybody owns their own direction. You own your own development. So I used to hear people say all the time, my boss doesn't, develop me or whatever. And I'm like, look, you own your own development, your own path. So you should have in your head some idea of what you need to do in the next year, in the next 2 years, next 3 years. Now, your boss needs to reciprocate and help you with that. But I think from a development perspective, if you're fortunate enough to have a plan, you own the plan. It's up to you to make sure whatever's laid out in there in those 1, 2, 3 years, it's up to you to do them, not to push them off to the last second at the end of the year. Oh, I'm going to go check this box real quick. So I think first and foremost, you're a young person, or you're let's say you're 30 and you're first time manager. Again, keep updating your development plan. You own your own track. So you need to have the relationships at work. When you're looking for mentors, if there's no formal program, you need to figure out, who are those people I can go talk to? Are they open to it? And but don't sit there and wait for some program to come to you or some epiphany to happen. Like, you need a mentor, then figure it out. Find somebody there or somebody at another company, and form the relationship. And I think that's something I think a lot of people don't think about when they're young. It's like basketball. You can have a really bad shooting night, but one thing you can always control is your defensive effort. And so I think when you're young and you're not quite sure directionally which way you're going or what the next thing is, the one thing you can always control is everybody at work every day should know that you have personality, you can talk, you're a team player, you will work your butt off, you'll say hi to people when you walk by them in the hallway. The reality is people talk about you, right? People are trying to forecast and picture you that are in leadership roles. They're trying to picture you in the next role. And so you have to be on all the time. You can't be up and down and moody and stare at the ground when you walk by somebody. It's just not going to work. They're going to say, well, how can they manage people when they don't even talk? So I think you can always control what you have in the moment. And no matter what your task is or what your job description is at the time, all those other things are the things that will help set you up for the next thing. And if you work on those relationship skills, you'll find the right mentor, or they'll find you, because they'll hear such good things about you. But it's totally up to you to make that happen.
We have 2 great cuts out of that, shortcuts. That was fantastic. And then I forgot my next question because I was so into that. So, all right. So you and this is going swimmingly, which means we're running out of time because it's going so quick. And this is, you've touched on a little bit of this, but what would you go back and tell your younger self?
Well, I think, again, I would probably say, look, you should get your CPA. Like, you don't have to be an accountant. I wish somebody would have just said that to me. Like, back then, I think I thought in my head, like, get your CPA means you're going to be an accountant. And I think at the time is like, I wasn't passionate about being an accountant. Nothing against it. I was okay at it. I knew I could figure things out, but I didn't see myself that way. But I wish somebody would have told me to do it anyway, because it would have, again, I think it would have removed obstacles or created more opportunities along the way. And it would have made me a better person. I mean, getting your CPA is no joke. And especially now that back then you didn't have to go for your 5th year. So the requirements were lower when I was in school. So I wish somebody would have said that to me, back then. I think the other thing is just, again, when we start at the beginning, when you're young, it's really hard to hear advice. As a parent, I can just sometimes see like my kids, whether they ask for it or not, I give them an opinion. One time I said to one of my kids, I don't remember which one it was, but they did something dumb. And I said, look, do you like open book tests? And they were like, is this a trick question? So they paused because they thought it was a major trick question. And they finally said, yeah. And I'm like, okay, so if I'm the book and you open it up and I give you the answer and you do the opposite, then why did you open the book? And I just think about in school, if you have an open book test, you never find the answer and then write down the wrong one. So why don't ask me if you don't want to hear it? And if I give it to you because you didn't ask me and you should have, then how can I make you understand where it comes from? I'm not telling you what to do. I'm telling you what I screwed up. That's really what I'm telling you. I'm telling you, I already screwed this up. Don't do it that way. And so I wish if I was talking to my younger self, I was like, listen to me, do this, do that, don't do this. And I think it's nothing against, it's just when we were young, it was the same thing, right? Whatever we were told, it was like, okay, I wish there was a way to get through and say, just don't do this. And I think that's the tough thing to tell yourself, like, that was so dumb. Like, why'd you do that? I told you not to do that. You did it anyway. You opened the book and you did it anyway. So I think if I could be, we had a group of finance interns last summer, and I could tell like took them out to lunch and I'm talking to them kind of like this. And I could tell like kind of listening, I could tell old guy talking. I got the old guy talking alert.
Right.
Because my kids do it. Right. And I'm like, gosh, I wish I could figure out the right words or the right length to just make the point. And one of the things we were talking about is just the anxiety of not knowing exactly where into finance to go. And I said, it doesn't matter. What you have to know is it's not this address over here. It's over there somewhere. It's not over there. So just head in the right direction. Eventually you'll end up where you're supposed to be as long as you go in the right direction. But don't start with an address or a GPS location. Just, is it north, south, east, or west? Do you like to serve? Do you like to create? Do you like to solve? What is that you really like? What's you? And don't worry about the title or is it accounting or FP&A? You could start out in accounting. It's okay to switch. It's fine. It'll be all right. Now, if you want to be accounting and you're like, oh, I want to work for the FBI, that might be a different change. But I was just trying to convey to them, like, don't get so anxious about knowing exactly everything right now. Just know who you are, be self-aware. I like to fix things, right? And I like to serve. I'm generally going to walk in this direction. I'll figure it out when I get there. And I think if you just approach it that way, it's a lot less stressful.
Yeah, it takes the anxiety away.
Yeah, just figure out the right direction. Because along the way, those are the things you're going to keep coming back to all the time, right? I like to serve. I like to fix. And that's no matter what your title is, that's what you're always going to lean on. As long as you know what you are, that's what you're going to lean on. And I think that's the bigger question of not the title or, the exact thing I have to be and I have to do this. Like it's going to change over time.
Yep. And only a parent understands what you were talking about, by the way, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's 3 parents in this room and
Yeah.
it's my son comes to me and he's a golfer and I played in college and I'll tell him something and then, yeah, okay. Yeah. And then 2 months later, he comes to me, hey, Tiger Woods said this. And I'm like, huh, yeah. Where you heard that before.
Yeah.
And so
brilliant.
It's so funny.
Yeah. Thanks.
What you just said is just so great. And I love it. And I think that's a fabulous way to end the show. There's so much more here. Unfortunately, we're limited on time because you have been able to, and the essence of what you said, as far as people not listening to maybe their parent or their direct manager, that's the essence of this show. so that people can go on here common themes, but hear it from the people that have made it.
Mm-hmm.
Your journey is different than so many others, and I love it. And that's what's great about it is you found where you were supposed to be.
Mm-hmm.
And you didn't know what you're supposed to be, but you knew what made you happy, what drove you, and it eventually drove you to the ultimate fixer, the CFO, the Chief Fixer Officer.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. That's really it.
That's awesome. So, all right, well, we're going to wrap this up, and let's just say that there is a young person out there that does want to reach out to you and get some advice and listen. How would they go about finding you?
I think the easiest thing is just to go to LinkedIn and send me a request or send me a message. I think that's probably the easiest thing.
Okay,
so
great. And I always like to tell everybody at the end of this that I am a recruiter, so I have a very expensive LinkedIn, and I'm on LinkedIn 24/7. So you will never find even a day when I'm on vacation that there isn't a little green mark on there that I'm checking LinkedIn. So you can find me LinkedIn as well, or just Google Chad Dean executive search and I come up. So Jack, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Such a great podcast. And Karen, our producer, actually said this was going to be one of the greatest, and she has incredible tuition. Are you expensive? Tuition expensive? Incredible intuition. And so thank you very much.
Well, thanks for being gentle. And I really enjoyed it. So I appreciate it. Thank you.
Great.
Thank you for joining us on this episode of Financial Footsteps, Candid Conversations with Financial Leaders. We encourage you to apply the knowledge and wisdom shared in these conversations to your own career. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe to our podcast and leave a review. Your feedback is important to us as we continue to bring you more candid conversations and thought-provoking insights from successful financial leaders.